ask you tonight to please open your Bible to actually 3 different places. So if you would begin by opening to Genesis chapter 42. Genesis chapter 42 is the first place we're going to open. When you find that place, I'm going to ask you to mark it so you can come back to it in a few moments. Genesis chapter 42. And then when you find Genesis chapter 42, I'm going to ask you to also turn to Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1. And then after you've found Job chapter 1, we're going to go to Proverbs chapter 19. We're actually going to begin in Proverbs chapter 19, but we'll go back to Genesis 42, and then we'll go to Job 1. And when we do that, don't lose your place in Proverbs, please, because we will come back to Proverbs one more time. So we'll begin in Proverbs chapter 19. We'll go to Genesis 42, then Job 1, and then we'll come back to Proverbs chapter 19. Thank you for being here this evening. I know many of you worked all day and you had to rush home and grab a bite to eat and get here just barely in time. Some of you, I appreciate your doing that. And then I'm sure there's some folks taking care of a nursery somewhere around here. I appreciate them doing that. If you can hear me, I'm grateful that you're willing to do that. And if they can't hear me, if someone would tell them, I would appreciate it. I'm grateful that the pastor and his wife have been very kind to us and taken us out to some very nice meals. And then Brother Tom and Sister Louise have allowed us to stay at their place. Such a beautiful, lovely place. And they're so accommodating and so welcoming into their home. We appreciate that. We're going to begin in Proverbs chapter 19. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you a verse that has been a mystery to me. You know, there are mysteries in the Bible. The Bible speaks of the mysteries of God. There are some things about God that I don't understand. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I'm glad I have a God who's so big that I can't understand everything about Him. If I could understand everything there is to understand about God, He would be no bigger than I am, and I need a God bigger than me that can help me when I have needs. And so tonight I'm going to show you one of those verses that has been a mystery to me. If you would look in chapter 19, Proverbs chapter 19, and we're going to read verse 23. Verse 23 says, "The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it refers to the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath the fear of the Lord shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil." Now this verse seems to clearly say, if I fear the Lord, I will not be visited with evil. However, it seems to me that many people who have feared the Lord have been affected by the evil that others brought upon them, or the evil that others did to them. Hold your place there in Proverbs, because we'll come back to it in a moment. And if you would turn to Genesis chapter 42, I want to show you an example of what I'm talking about. In Genesis chapter 42, I'm going to read verse 18. Genesis 42, 18 says, "And Joseph said unto them the third day, This do and live, for I fear God." There it is, just as plain as it can be in black and white. Joseph said, "I fear God." But didn't Joseph's brothers throw him in a pit so he could starve to death? That sounds evil to me. Didn't Joseph's brothers sell him as a slave? That sounds evil to me. Didn't Potiphar's wife lie about Joseph? That sounds evil to me. Wasn't Joseph cast into prison when he wasn't even guilty? But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. All right, if you would, let me show you another example. Turn to Job chapter 1. You know, maybe Joseph just said, I fear the Lord. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe he didn't really fear the Lord. Maybe he just said, I fear the Lord. Or maybe Joseph didn't understand what it meant to fear the Lord. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe he was sincere when he said it, but he didn't understand what it meant when he said, I fear the Lord. And maybe that's the explanation. Well, let's look at Job chapter 1 and verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz. That's Uz, not Oz. We're not going to see the wizard. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. All right, now if you would, look at verse 8, please. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Even God himself said that Job feared God. But do you remember the day that Job was in his house fasting and praying for his children? He had 10 children. And Job said, as far as I know, all 10 of my children are right with God. But just in case, it might be that one of them could have possibly said something in his heart to God. Not even said it out loud, but maybe said something in his heart against God. He said, I'm going to fast and pray for my children. And while he was in his house fasting and praying, one of his servants came running through the door, and he said, Job, several of your servants and I, we were out in the field and we were taking care of the livestock, and the enemy came and they attacked. And Job, they killed every one of your servants except for me. I'm the only one who escaped to come and tell you that the enemy stole 1,000 of your oxen and 500 of your donkeys. And before he could get the words out of his mouth, a second servant came running through the door. He said, Job, several of your servants and I, we were in the field and we were taking care of the sheep. And fire began to fall from heaven. And Job, that fire killed every one of your servants except for me. I'm the only one who escaped to come and tell you that the fire killed 7,000 of your sheep. And before he could get the words out of his mouth, a third servant came running through the door. He said, Job, I was in the field with several of your servants. We were taking care of the camel. And the enemy came, a different one than before. And they attacked us. And Job, they killed every one of your servants except for me. I'm the only one who escaped to come and tell you that the enemy stole 3,000 of your camels. And before he could get the words out of his mouth, a fourth servant comes running in the door. He's red in the face, he's perspiring, he's out of breath, he's disheveled, covered with dust. He says, Job, several of your servants and I were down at your oldest son's house. We were serving a feast, and all 10 of your children were there. He said, Job, a great wind came out of the wilderness. When it did, it blew down all 4 corners of the house. And Job, it killed every one of your servants except for me. I'm the only one who escaped to come and tell you that all 10 of your children died. But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. Noah feared the Lord. The Bible said by faith, moved with fear, he prepared, said by faith, Noah, moved with fear, prepared an ark. But you remember what happened to Noah after the flood. One of his sons saw his nakedness, and God cursed his entire family. David feared the Lord. The Lord himself said about David, a man after mine own heart. But remember what happened to David? David's son, Amnon, forced his sister Tamar in their very house. And then David's other son, Absalom, got so mad at Amnon for doing that, he murdered his own brother, Amnon. Then later, Absalom got so mad at his father, he took the kingdom away from him. And then when David's forces came to take the city back, David gave very specific instructions: don't let anything happen to Absalom. But David's own nephew, Joab, found Absalom in a defenseless position and murdered him in cold blood. John the Baptist feared the Lord. Jesus Christ himself said about John the Baptist, among them that are born of women, there hath not risen a greater than John the Baptist. You remember what happened to John the Baptist, don't you? He got his head cut off. Now, in my lifetime, up until a few years ago, I had never heard of anybody getting their head cut off except reading it in a history book, World War II, the Japanese with our soldiers and things like that. But now, in our day and age, we've seen it. We've heard about it on the news and seen, sort of in a way, seen it happen. And I don't know about you, but every time I see it or hear about it, I cringe, and I just think how evil that is. Paul feared the Lord. You remember what Paul said about himself? He said, I received stripes above measure. Paul said, they've beat me on my back with a whip so many times, the scars crisscross my back to the point where I can't even count them anymore. Paul said, in prisons more frequent. Paul said, when I go to town, I don't stay at Sister Kay's apartment. They put me in prison. Paul said, I've spent more nights in prison than I have hotel rooms. He said, in prison, more frequent. He said, in deaths, oft. Paul said several times, I went out to preach. Some other men went with me. And while we were there preaching, some of those men got killed. Paul said, 5 times 40 stripes save one. Thrice beaten with rods, once stoned, thrice shipwrecked, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils by my own countrymen, by the heathen, in the city, in the wilderness, in the sea, among false brethren. Paul said, I've suffered weariness, painfulness, hunger, thirst, cold, nakedness. But I thought Proverbs 19:23 said, the fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall not be visited with evil. If you would go back to the book of Proverbs, this time go to Proverbs chapter 8. What does it mean to fear the Lord? Well, let's look in Proverbs chapter 8. In chapter 8, I'm going to read just the first phrase in verse 13. 8:13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Now, I know that I hate the evil that somebody else tries to do to me. Don't you hate it when somebody else tries to do evil to you? In fact, I'm sure everybody in the whole world hates the evil that somebody else tries to do to them. So if that's the evil it's talking about there, then everybody fears the Lord. And we know that's not true. So what evil is it talking about? All right, if you would now turn to chapter 16. And let's look at verse 6. Proverbs chapter 16. And we're going to look at verse 6. By mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. Okay, if I have to depart from the evil that somebody else is trying to do to me in order to fear the Lord, well, there's sometimes I can't get away from the evil that somebody else is trying to do to me. You remember when Paul was in Iconium? And they were going to stone him, and he found out about it, so he left Iconium and went down to Lystra. And when he was in Lystra, the folks in Iconium came down to Lystra, and the Bible uses the phrase, they stirred up the people in Lystra. And then the folks from Iconium and the folks from Lystra doubled up on him, and they stoned him and dragged him outside the city and left him laying there dead. Paul couldn't get away from the evil that somebody else was trying to do to him. Go back to chapter 19, if you would. And let's look at verse 23 one more time. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. Oh, okay, now I think I see it. This verse means if I fear the Lord, no evil will visit my heart. If I fear the Lord, no evil will visit my soul. If I fear the Lord, no evil will come to visit my mind. In other words, if I fear the Lord, no evil intentions will come into my heart so that I'm tempted to do evil to you. You see, my problem is this, one of my many problems. My problem is this: I often read the Bible from a selfish viewpoint. I often read the Bible looking for something in the Bible that will bless me. I often read the Bible looking for something in the Bible that will protect me from you. You know, sometimes I think of the Bible as a shield, and if I hold it in my hand enough, if I carry it under my arm long enough, and especially if I open it and read it once in a while, then it becomes a shield that protects me from you. You know, we treat the Bible almost like if we carry it around long enough, it'll keep all the vampires away. It'll keep all the bad guys away. But you know, sometimes when I read the Bible, I find something in the Bible that protects you from me.
Good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
You know, the evil that I have in my heart, that I feel towards you, that evil is going to ill affect me to a greater degree than any evil that anybody else can do to me. In fact, the evil that I let visit my heart does more damage to me than all the evil that all of you could do together against me. And by the way, so that means the Bible is a guaranteed protection for me from the worst evil there is. The evil that I have in my own heart. You know, the worst enemy Ray Young has is standing behind the pulpit tonight. The biggest enemy I have, the worst problem I have is speaking to you tonight. And so the Bible becomes a protection for me from the worst evil there is. You remember what Jesus said to the disciples? You don't need to turn to it, but in Mark chapter 7, Jesus said, "Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart, but into his belly. But that which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adultery, fornications, murders," and it lists several others. And then it says, "All these evil things come from within and defile the man." You know, the evil that you bring upon me might cause me some discomfort. The evil you bring upon me might harm me. The evil you bring upon me might damage my reputation. It might damage my emotional well-being. It might hurt me physically. It might harm me in some way, but it cannot defile me. The only evil that can defile me is the evil that I let come visit my heart, that I feel towards you or someone else. Proverbs 19:23 says, "The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied." You know, you can be satisfied while somebody else is trying to do evil to you. Have you ever tried to get somebody's goat and they wouldn't let you? No matter what you said or did, they just smiled and act like it wasn't even affecting them. And you know, you can be satisfied. While somebody else is trying to do evil to you, you can still be satisfied. But you cannot be satisfied while you do evil to somebody else. In fact, I'll go so far as to say you cannot be satisfied while you want to do evil to somebody else. You know, sometimes when I don't do the evil that I feel in my heart towards somebody else, it's not because I'm pious. It's not because I'm spiritual. It's not because I'm righteous. It's because I'm chicken. I'm afraid he's got a brother bigger than I am. I'm afraid, you know, if I do it, God will break my leg. Worse than that, I'm afraid if I do it, somebody's going to tell Mama I did it. You cannot be satisfied while you let that evil visit your heart. The problem is this: some of us enjoy the visit of that evil so much, we open the door and let it in. Oh no, we're never going to poke him in the eye. Oh no, we're never going to slit his tires. No, we're not going to burn his house. But boy, it's fun thinking about what it would be like to get to do it. Have you ever been like I've been before? Have you ever sat there and thought the next time he does that?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever sat there and thought the next time she says that? Hey, have you ever been in a situation where somebody said something and you just kind of and they walked away, and 10 minutes later or 2 hours later you thought, man, I should have said. Man, the next time I know what I'm going to say. You know, some of us have let that evil visit so long it owes rent. Because we enjoy its company. Oh, no, I would never do that because the police might catch me. Oh, no, I would never do that because I don't want to go to prison. Oh, no, I would never do that because I don't want my children to be ashamed of their daddy. Boy, it sure is fun rolling it over in my mind, thinking about it. But the Bible says, if I fear the Lord, evil will not visit me. If I've got evil as my guest of honor, if I've got evil sitting at my table, if I've got evil sitting down in the living room of my heart discussing things with me, I am not fearing the Lord according to the Bible. Well, what does it mean to fear the Lord? It means to get that evil out of your heart.
Yeah, that's right.
It means to not feel evil towards your brother, not feel evil towards your sister, not feel evil towards another church member, not feel evil towards your spouse, not feel evil towards your parents, not feel evil towards anybody. You know, we like to make the Christian life real complicated. You know, we want to ask questions. Well, what does it mean to fear the Lord? Let's have a series of lessons on the possibilities of what it might mean to fear the Lord. And as long as we can keep that series going and act like we're confused and we don't understand exactly what it means to fear the Lord, then we don't have to fear the Lord. Because we tried our best. We ask all the questions and nobody can answer them. Well, God can answer them.
Yeah.
He made it real clear. He said, if you want to fear the Lord, get that evil out of your heart. Get that bitterness out of your heart. Get those feelings out of your heart that you have towards that person. Yeah, but you don't know what they did. It doesn't say, regardless, it doesn't say depending on what they do. The Bible says the fear of the Lord tendeth to life. You know, we say a man tendeth to his garden. Or we say, well, I'm going to tend to that business this afternoon. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life. It puts life in order. It keeps it tidy. It makes it productive. Okay, have you ever tidied up your work cabinet, your shop? Well, you've never done that. Have you ever tidied up your kitchen? Let's ask that. Some of you ladies have done that before. You've tidied up your kitchen cabinets. Well, that's what we need to do with our heart. We need to tidy up our heart. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life. What we need to do tonight is tend to our lives. We need to tidy up our lives by protecting ourselves from that evil, not the evil that somebody else might try to do to me, but worse than that, the evil that I might let visit my heart. It didn't say the evil that I might do to somebody else. It said the evil that I might let visit my heart. The evil that might tempt me to want to think about how much fun it would be to get them back. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, to hate that evil I've let dwell in my heart all these years. The fear of the Lord, by the fear of the Lord, man departeth from evil. He departs from that evil that he wants to do or even enjoys thinking about doing to somebody else. Now, don't let this scare you, but that was my introduction. Now I'm going to preach the sermon. And here's my sermon. That was an introduction that illustrates my sermon. My sermon is this. Anytime we don't understand something about God, it's simply that. We don't understand. It's not that God's wrong. It's not that God's bad or evil or inconsistent. It's not that God's untruthful. It's not that God's unfair. It's not that God didn't keep His word. It's not that God said something in the Bible that's not true. The problem is when we don't understand God, that's the problem. We don't understand. I remember the morning I was sitting in my office, a little before daylight. I was reading my Bible, and I came to Proverbs chapter 19, verse 23. And when I read that verse, I said almost out loud, and with a very cocky, very arrogant tone in my heart, I said, yeah, what about Job? I said, yeah, what about Joseph? And I said, yeah, and John the Baptist, and Paul the Apostle. And I thought I had God backed into a corner. I said, yeah, prove that verse to me. What about those guys? And as clearly as I'm speaking to you right now, God spoke to me. I didn't hear Him with my ears, but I heard Him with my heart as clearly as you're hearing me with your ears right now. And God said, I'm not talking about that kind of evil. I'm talking about the evil you have in your heart. And God was so brazen that He called the person's name about whom I had evil in my heart. And I had to get out of my chair, get on my knees behind my desk, with tears in my eyes, running down my cheeks. I had to confess my sin. I said, sin. No, I had never poked him in the eye. I'd never said anything evil to him. In fact, I had never said anything evil about him out loud. And I wish that I could stand here tonight and say, and bless God, from that moment to this, there has been no evil visit my heart. But I can't say that. Too many times, I've had to confess my sin again. Too many times, I've had to go back and tidy up my heart. Too many times, I've had to admit the bitterness that I had allowed to creep back in again, to come by and visit. How about you? Could I have every head bowed and every eye closed? Is there anyone here tonight that would admit